Afternoon, everybody. My name's Richard Moore, and welcome to episode 4 of the Business Lincolnshire live show. Now, the aim of these monthly shows, as you know, if you've been on the first 3 shows we've had, is really to engage with businesses across Lincolnshire, talk about topics that are affecting them on a day-to-day basis, answer questions you may have, and also share the support that's available to you as business owners across Lincolnshire. If you're getting involved in the show, hopefully you've joined through the LinkedIn live event. The live event, there's a chat area just to the left of your screen. You'll see there's a chat area. You can put comments in there, ask questions if you want questions to come through to us live. Same on Facebook and on YouTube. Again, you can engage just by filling in questions in the comments area. So please get involved with the show. The more engaged you are, the better, really, for these shows. Now, the whole point of this month's show, unlike the other shows, is to talk about the green agenda. I think we're all getting affected by climate change. We all have our part to play in reducing our carbon footprint as business owners. So this show is all dedicated to that. And I think there's never been a more apt time looking at the news and what's been happening across Europe, the floods in Germany and Austria, the temperatures, the heat waves we've seen in America, certainly Northern America and Canada. We've seen that 54.4 degrees. I think it was a record temperature in Death Valley. All of these things have been linked to climate change. You know, the reduction in the ice caps, the way that the glaciers are melting, that the sea levels are rising. You know, I think it's indisputable now that climate change is responsible for these weather events, responsible for everything that's happening. So really today's show was focusing on the green agenda and how businesses across Lincolnshire, we can all play our part in helping to reduce our carbon footprint and really work towards that goal of net zero by 2050 that the government set out for us also. On the show today, we've got a range of guests coming on. The format of the show, again, is going to really be focused around a mixture of Q&A and the guests sharing their insights. So first up, we're going to have David Knight. Now, he's a business and savings and resource efficiency specialist for Business Lincolnshire. And David's going to discuss how you can audit your business and your impact and how you can really start addressing your own carbon footprint. He'll share some of the opportunities that are available, some of the support that's available to you. So again, it'll be interesting if any of you run businesses watching this, and I assume most people in the audience run a business or are involved with a business in Lincolnshire. It'll be really interesting to see the support that's available for you. Then we'll move across to speak to Mark Dodwell. Now, Mark is in charge of the Natwest's Future Mobility Initiative. So that's about having electric vehicles in your business. So how you can run electric vehicles. So Mark's going to join us and really share some of the insights that NatWest have got to share and the support and some of the programs that they have available that you can get involved with as a business. And again, all around the electric vehicle side and running electric vehicles as you shift away from petrol and diesel vehicles. And then the final part of the show, part 3, David's going to come back and we're going to have a discussion with a couple of businesses who are actually reducing their carbon footprint, putting these principles into practice. So we're going to talk to Ann Barrasso. Ann's joining us from Roy Thorne Solicitors. They've got an environmental policy. They've been working on this in their business very actively. So Ann's going to talk to David about that side. And then we're being joined by Paul and Flora Bennett from Brackenborough Hall Coach House. And again, they're going to talk about their journey and how they've been effectively reducing their carbon footprint as well. So let's get on with the show and introduce David. Let's just add in David. Hi, David. How are you doing?
Hi, good afternoon, Richard. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Fabulous. Now, just tell us a little bit about yourself, David, and what your role is with Business Lincolnshire.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So, as I said, my name is David Knight. I am the Resource Efficiency Lead for Business Lincolnshire. What we look to do is work with organisations to understand their environmental performance and look at opportunities, to identify opportunities that they can invest to make changes either to infrastructure. We even look at things like behavioural change and staff as well. So I've been working in the environment now for close to 10 years, and I'm working with a range of organisations from third-party organisations to local governments to SMEs to support them in working towards minimising their resource use and reducing their carbon footprints.
Fabulous. And we all hear a lot about net zero. Can you just explain a little bit what that is?
Certainly. So it might be best to probably look at what net zero means to an organization. So, as you've mentioned, Richard, the fact that we're having this conversation hopefully by now means that we all understand the importance of carbon emissions and why we need to reduce them. So the idea is to reduce global temperature, to reduce our emissions, to limit global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees. And we can only do that by stopping to produce more carbon emissions from going into the atmosphere. So the natural planet cycle will absorb about 60% of all carbon emissions. So there's still roughly about 30% of all the emissions that we produce, which are not being absorbed naturally by the planet. So by net zero, what we need to do as organizations is to, first of all, reduce our carbon emissions at source. So that would look at the efficiency of the business, look at how we manage our resources. We do have to expect, however, that there's always going to be some carbon emissions. We're not, with current technology and current techniques, we're just not going to be able to get to zero carbon. So we look at what we call persistent carbon, and what we need to do as organizations is to look at removal programs. So that'll be things like investing in reforestation, or restoring wetlands, or any sort of bioenergy type investment, which actually looks to take carbon out of the atmosphere. So what you would do is you would actually remove the same amount of carbon emissions that you've put into the atmosphere, so you have that net zero balance. So that way we're not actually adding any further carbon to the environment.
Oh, okay. And every business has got a part to play in that, I take it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, everything we do has carbon emissions, from the food we eat, every time we get into our vehicle, every time we turn on the computer or the laptop. All of these things take energy and emit carbon as a result of that. So everything we do has an impact, and we need to really look at ourselves, at our supply chains, at our activities, and look to make positive, conscious choices in everything that we do. Yeah.
Perfect. And if most businesses, I'd have thought, aren't really actively involved in this yet. Where would you suggest businesses get started when they're starting to think about their own carbon footprint and how they can reduce that?
Certainly. So, I guess the easiest place to start is to look at home, so to speak. So for an organization would be to actually just look at your organization. I'll ask the question, do you actually understand what resources you're using? Do you understand how you're using those resources? So the first step we look at with any organization is just to understand what resources you're using initially. So obviously energy, so electricity, gas, water. And then we all produce waste. Most of us travel, and then we'll have resources that we'll use. That could either be things like paper for professional services, that could be materials for manufacturing, or food for catering and hospitality sectors. So really understanding all of the resources you use. And I guess the key fundamental part in starting out on any journey is to actually know how much you're using. So with a lot of organizations that we work with and speak to, the first thing to look at is, are you recording your data? Are you looking at it? Are you capturing it? Are you actually going through it? And it's really interesting to find that a lot of organizations, particularly I'd probably say on the smaller end, maybe don't do this as much. And it's really recommended. The most important thing is, as we go towards net zero, in order to understand what your carbon footprint is, you really need to have the data to convert to carbon, to actually know where you are, what position you're in.
Yeah.
Once you have that information, you can then start to think about, well, what are we doing? What processes use our resources? What infrastructure do you have, like equipment, or what are we doing? And then start to think about, well, where can we make changes? So for example, if you're in professional services and using a lot of electricity, so you'd look at, okay, well, what systems are using the electricity? So lighting, heating, computer equipment, etc. And then what steps can we put in place to try and minimize that? Now that can be through behavioral programs, working with staff, engaging with staff, getting them to think about turning off their laptops at the end of the day, or their monitors when they're not at their desk. And then also thinking about big infrastructure changes. So, for example, what sort of lighting do we have? Can we upgrade our lighting? What kind of heating systems do we have? Can we upgrade our heating? So that's really the best place to start with. It's just really to understand the business, understand the resources that you're using, and then look to find improvements where they exist.
Yeah, so it's not just the business owner dictating this. He's got to get all the team involved, all his staff involved at every level, and everyone's got to be thinking about this.
Absolutely. The driver to this has to come from leadership. So senior leadership does need to drive this. They're the ones who set the ambition. They're the ones who, ultimately lead the organization forward. But yes, every single staff member has a role to play. no matter how efficient the equipment is, if staff aren't using it correctly, it's never going to be as efficient as it can be. So it's really important that you engage with staff. You run various campaigns, you speak to them, find out what their opinions are, find out what their interests are as well, and really look to use your staff as that extra resource to work towards minimizing your carbon footprint. So only together can we tackle this challenge. So it's really important that communication is embedded throughout.
Yeah, and that everyone's aligned around the goals. And do you actually set yearly goals? Is it like where you'll say, well, this is where we want to be in 5 years as a business, so these are our annual goals we're going to hit to get to that, like a milestone?
It can vary depending on the organization. So what we tend to say when starting out, looking at the year ahead is probably the simplest way of doing it. Just thinking about, when you're first starting out, you're looking at your data and starting to understand it. Just looking at that year ahead is a good place to start. But ultimately, yes, what organizations probably need to do is to start thinking about that 5-year plan. Where are we going to be in 5 years? What are we going to be doing over the next 5 years? And what can we start to introduce over that 5-year period? Now, we would work with organizations to understand that 5-year period, and then we'd ask them to set yearly milestones. So yes, that's where you want to be in 5 years, but what do you need to do each year to get to that point? Targets can either be direct reductions, or sometimes they can actually just be putting infrastructure in place to actually work towards that overall 5-year target. So, every business can approach this differently and probably will have a different outlay, but it does need to be a combination of both short-term interim measures guided by a long-term business plan.
Perfect. And you talk about some of the support that's available there. Should we share some of the support that you can offer to people? I know there's the government support, and then there's more local support as well, isn't there?
There is. So if we look at the government support first of all, then, so the Together for Our Planet, which is also the SME Climate Hub, this is I'll basically say it's an initiative that's been set up from the International Chamber of Commerce, the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and the We Mean Business Coalition, along with the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. In collaboration with Net Zero team at Oxford University, they've effectively pulled together tools, resources, and other guides specifically addressed to the SME community. There's a lot of information in there which helps you understand where to start, things to consider, and really how to get started on that net zero journey. And it's a real collaborative, so you pledge to your commitments in terms of what you want to do, and there's a lot of support available through that just to help businesses on their journey at any stage throughout that journey. And that's specifically designed for SMEs.
That's more a downloadable toolkit, is it, David?
It is, yes. They've got guides online. They also have a downloadable toolkit that you can get straight from there, which has a really simple, easy to use sort of structure, and it helps with the methodology in terms of how you approach this. On a more local level then, so as I've discussed, through Business Lincolnshire, we offer resource efficiency audits. So that would effectively be myself. I would come to the organization and together we would look at the resources you're using, and we would look at identifying opportunities. Now, I can do that either on a problematic area. So for example, if you're really struggling with your heating, or you have some ideas already in place and you just want to understand a bit more about it, we can refine the approach we take to just that. Or we can do a general overview of the resource performance and look to identify broader opportunities for the organization. We also look to identify different technologies you can invest in, and help to explain the pros and cons to any investment, and also the payback periods as well. So as an organization, through the site visit, you would actually have a good idea of terms of what is available to you and whether to invest now or how to plan to invest maybe in the future as well.
And that's you run an audit through there, did you say? It's like an audit of where you are now, and then
It is, yeah. So it's a site audit. So we come to site. So first of all, I would look at your energy data. So the first thing I would ever ask you for is a copy of your energy data, in terms of what you're using and your resource information. So we do an initial desktop analysis to understand the position you're in currently. Then we come to site and we have a look at the different systems. So for example, if we're looking at heating, we'll look at the plant you have, we'll look at the timers, the controls, the systems, how it's operated. We'll speak to staff in terms of their comforts, whether they find it's too cold, too hot, etc. We also then understand the business in terms of what you're doing. And then we come and we use all of that information together to provide you with the report. And in that report, we highlight the opportunities that exist around heating, mainly around sort of the type of heating that matches what you need for organizations, because that can sometimes be a sort of a large problematic area for them.
Yeah. And what size businesses should apply? Even 1 or 2 man bands, would they qualify for this, or are you looking at larger businesses?
So it is. So the Business Lincolnshire program is ERDF funded. So there are eligibility requirements, but ultimately we work with SME. So that's the EU definition of an SME. So that's less than 250 employees, and with a turnover, I believe, less than 40 million. So any SME, regardless of the size, can take part of this. But obviously, you will need to confirm eligibility first through the Business Lincolnshire team.
Amazing. I really like that. And have you got any bits of advice to give people while you're on, David? So things that you've seen working over the last few years that you want to share with anybody?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, often organizations ask, where should I invest first? What should I invest in? And I guess, the difficult thing is it just really depends on where you are. But key things, very quick win, and the quickest win, and surprising that a lot of organizations still haven't done this yet, is to look at your lighting. Changing to LED lighting is an immediate 50% saving on the cost of running lighting. Particularly important for manufacturing. Any manufacturing business where you run long hours or run night shifts, upgrading your lighting is a really good way to save money and reduce your carbon in the first instance. Other things to look at is heating systems. So just really understanding, what we find with organizations is a lot of buildings would have been built, say, 20, 30 years ago, and over time would have changed. And often the heating systems are still the same. So it's really thinking, just because the heating system is in the building doesn't mean it matches what you need to as well. So it's really thinking about your heating and making sure the system you have in place works with your organization. But I guess the easiest, the most cost-effective way is to think about the controls. Mm-hmm. So that would be either mechanical controls or manual controls. So manual controls would be, working with staff to turn lights off when they leave the office. Easy enough to do. But putting in mechanicals. No, and again, that's why that engagement is really important, to get staff to think about these things and to continuously just remind them that these are the things they need to be doing. But you can support that with putting in mechanical controls. So lighting has sensors, movement sensors. They also have lighting sensors. They can actually measure the amount of light. So particularly where you have lots of windows, I walk into many offices and see all the lights on, and they're completely glazed down both walls, and you just think I could turn the lights off and not a single person would notice I've done it. So thinking about putting the right type of sensor in the right place helps to ensure that the systems in place work most effectively. And heating particularly. So often we have timers. So we'll have it starts, it ends, and the heating system runs between that. But thinking about an outside air temperature sensor linked up to the boiler. Now what that will do is that will actually measure the external temperature, and it will feed the boiler the information. So it allows your heating system to become more proactive. So it measures the outside temperature, and it adjusts its heating temperature in terms of its output flow temperatures to match the external temperature. And what that means is that rather than continually trying to heat to 80 degrees, if it's a mild day, as we do get in winter often, it'll actually only heat the water to maybe 50 degrees if that's all that's needed. So you save that energy just in the boiler being aware of what's happening outside, becoming more proactive rather than always being reactive. And that can save about 6% on your heating bill. So, it's just really thinking about what type of controls you have in place and can they be improved, because it doesn't cost a lot of money to put these things in place, and they can actually make savings in the long run as well.
Perfect. Lovely. Right. Well, we'll call an end to there, because I know you're coming back later to talk to a couple of businesses who are actually proactively doing this. So I look forward to that. And then we'll move across now to speak to Mark Dodwell. As I said, Mark is from Natwest Bank. He's responsible for the Future Mobility Initiative, and he's going to be talking to us about the scheme, the program, how it works, and it's all around this shift to electric vehicles. So let's introduce Mark, pull Mark into the stream. Now then, Mark, how are you?
Good, thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be joining you.
Thank you very much. So the Natwest have been quite proactive in the switch to electric vehicles. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark, and what your role is with Natwest?
Sure, yeah. So Mark Dodwell, I've been with Natwest for 13 years, but at the beginning of last year, I was asked to move across. At the beginning of last year, our new CEO, Alison Rose, announced our purpose-led strategy. And at the core of that strategy was climate. Climate was a real kind of, we recognised as a group that as an organisation that employs 50,000 people in the UK and probably, I think, is around 70,000 globally now, we have a role to play in driving climate change to all the things that yourself and David just talked around. I guess at the heart of that, some of the work we did in 2019 as we built up to releasing that strategy and launching that strategy was transport is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the UK. And therefore, we bank probably 35% of SME businesses in the UK. So we have a role, a duty to play to help our customers and our staff achieve net zero through transport. So the Future Mobility team was created at that time, really with that in mind. How do we get ourselves to net zero? How do we help our customer base get to net zero? And to everything that David's just talked about, if we're going to achieve net zero across commercial businesses across the UK, the transport is key. And in the Future Mobility team, in doing that, we have been looking across the 3 mega trends of future mobility, which are kind of autonomous vehicles, mobility as a service, and the main one I'm really here to talk to you about today, because it's the one that's here and now, is electrification. Autonomous vehicles is probably a few years off. Mobility as a service is kind of not irrelevant, but it's less urgent. But electrification is kind of here now and is going to impact the SMEs that are listening into this call and all businesses across Lincolnshire.
Yeah, and that's everybody. What size businesses again are you talking to on a day-to-day basis? Is it just the big boys who've got a big fleet of vehicles, or is it everybody?
No, we literally talk to startups, to small businesses, all the way through to large corporate organisations. We are having this subject of climate and transport is on the agenda through all of our relationship managers when they're interacting with their customers. It's generally on the agenda now. It needs to be.
Yeah, perfect. And just tell us a bit about the Future Mobility Initiative then. How does it work, and what's the background for the future of it and the future of it?
So really, it's not an initiative as such. It's how do we help our customers get to net zero through transport? So it really is focusing in on the fact that the government have announced that in 2030 there is a ban on internal combustion engine new car and new van sales. Hybrids, plug-in hybrids, that ban kicks in 2035. I think if we're honest, that took the automotive manufacturers by surprise. This time last year, that was kind of announced. Well, originally it was 2040, then it was 2035, and then at the back end of last year they made it 2030. So for us, it's not about any one thing. It's really how do we help our customers kind of make that transition. Electrification is there. Electrification isn't going to fix everything in the transport sector. Some of the bigger pieces of machinery, vehicles, trucks and the like, it's not going to be electrification per se that drives the solution. There will be other forms like hydrogen, and there's lots of work there, and we're doing work with all sorts of organisations to understand that. But I guess it's really, at the moment, electrification is here now, and it's the sort of things that we can do. And one of the things we have done as a first in the market collaboration, we partnered at the beginning of this year with Octopus Energy. So we have created a partnership that every one of our customers can benefit from, that if you are looking at electric vehicles, then we have a partner, a supplier, Octopus Energy, who can help you with the charge points that you're going to need for those electric vehicles. They can also help you with all of the energy, challenges, the infrastructure that might come with those charge points that are required. And that's just the first of a number of different propositions that we're currently working on, and we'll be launching sort of this year and into next year that help with this electrification transition agenda.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously 2030 is 9 years away, but I suppose businesses have to start now, because they're leasing vehicles for 4 or 5 years. It's not that long, is it really?
No, absolutely, and that's the key. It's 1 or 2 cycles of vehicle change away. And I guess the bit that's really driving it, disruption is coming from all angles. So climate change, you can't avoid climate change, as you said at the start, Richard, with everything that's going on. You can't bury your head in the sand and ignore that. But things like technology, consumer behaviour, COVID has had an impact on transport, and disruption is coming for all commercial businesses. The way I view it, it doesn't matter which sector you operate in, the disruption from future mobility is going to affect your business. It's going to affect it because the local authorities across the country are looking at clean air zones, they're looking at zero emission zones. So you're going to start to have to think, where do my goods and my people travel? Where are they going as a business? Where are my people going? Where are my goods going? And really starting to think about, if you haven't heard of it, Scope 1 and Scope 3 emissions. That transport features really heavily in a business's Scope 1 and Scope 3 emissions. And the work that David's doing would clearly highlight that to the businesses that are listening in. But you need to understand kind of what you're generating emissions-wise from your transport functions today. And it's wider than you think. It's not just the cars you run. It's the employees who work for you when they commute to work. That is, as a business, that's emissions that you're generating as a business. It's any business travel. It's raw materials or finished goods that leave your place of work or your premises. They all account for transport emissions. So, it's really key that businesses are thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I think that first lockdown, we all got a taste of what it could be like, didn't we? Where there were no cars on the road, everything was suddenly, you just thought, nature suddenly started taking back straight away, didn't it?
Yeah, local authorities, and we all enjoyed the low air pollution, the low congestion, and local authorities would love that to maintain. Unfortunately, COVID drives people off of public transport. It has seen a rise in active travel. And we are active travel, cycling, walking. The micro-mobility industry didn't really exist until about 5 years ago. That would be a $500 billion industry in the next 10 years. So that's e-scooters, e-bikes. We've seen a huge growth in those sectors. So future mobility affects all walks of life. And that bit around where do your goods travel and where do your people travel, last mile, first mile, particularly in city centres where clean air zones or zero emission zones are being kind of installed, will have a real impact on potential Lincolnshire businesses that are moving stuff across the country, or their people across the country, could impact where you can get to. So lots to think about.
Absolutely. And have you seen some real cost benefits to businesses then? Are there some real areas that you've seen businesses saving money as well as having to invest a lot of money to get to this stage?
Yeah, it's like anything that, where there is transition. The early adopters get the benefit of the incentives. So there are incentives out there at the moment for businesses and individuals, and the government have had those out there for quite some time. Interestingly, they're the only government. I wrote an article earlier this year on incentives across Europe for electric vehicles. Our government is the only government that's actually reduced incentives. Everyone else is putting them up. But we did see a big jump in electric vehicle sales last year, and that was probably driven a little bit by COVID. But there's a tipping point between how much money the government can put towards this when that starts to tail off, because the adoption rates go up. So there are benefits out there today. There's benefits for actually buying the car. There's benefits to having electric charge points installed on your home or your property, your business property. So there's absolutely benefits there. We're also seeing, if you're working in a supply chain, the benefits are much bigger actually if you're in a supply chain. Some of the larger corporates that are at the tops of those supply chains are now kind of very much focused on something called streamlined energy and carbon reporting, and they have to mandatory kind of report every emission that they are generating. What they're starting to do is go down through their supply chain and say, well, as a member of our supply chain, you need to be able to tell us what you're producing, because ultimately everything you produce ends up with us. And that's putting pressure, it's putting benefits, but also pressure on businesses. So your supply chain viability could be at risk if you can't start to do this. You can't think about what you're doing. You can't measure it.
It's passing accountability down the supply chain, but it also is going to get to businesses who haven't started this process yet. And that you think you can foresee problems in the future for people like that who can't comply.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we've seen it across our own organisation. We've gone out to our supply chains because of the size we are. We have to report this stuff now, so we are going through our supply chain. I think the other benefits that you've seen, particularly in the manufacturing space, there are new markets there are new technologies, there are new sectors arising, like the micromobility sector. And actually that throws up lots of opportunity for businesses to transition, maybe pivot what they're doing today. We've done quite a lot of work with automotive manufacturers. Because if you're a business today that's creating, a part that goes into an internal combustion engine vehicle, that part might not be a viable part in 10 years' time. So actually, you need to start to think about, what might you do? Might it be something electric vehicles, or might be something completely different? So again, lots to think about, but lots of benefits and challenges off the back of those things that you're thinking through.
Mm-hmm. And just share where people can go to get more information on this and get support.
Yeah, sure. So I think, where do you start? The best thing to do is kind of think about your goods and your people. As I said there, the Business Hub, the screen has just come up there. If you visit Natwest Business Hub, we've written a lot of articles in this whole electrification space. You can actually, there is a future mobility section on the website that you can go visit. You can see all the articles we've written. But I think, back to the points I was making earlier, as a business, start to think about where your goods and your people are traveling. Where do they travel? If you're running a small fleet or a larger fleet of vehicles, I often get asked, well, yeah, but the challenge around moving to electric vehicles is mileage range, and everyone has a hang up about mileage range and how do I fuel them when I'm out and about. We talk to a lot of businesses, and it's like, okay, so if you're running a few cars, well, maybe only transition one to electric, try it out, see how it goes. If you want support through, Octopus Energy, you can do that via the natwest.com website. You can just go to natwest.com and you can connect with Octopus Energy, and they will help you kind of think about that whole charging support that it's needed potentially for businesses. And that's something you've got to think about as a business. How do you fuel? As a business, do you give your employees access to home charging? Do you provide charging at the business premises for those staff that are using company vehicles? Are you going to supply charging for customers? Because more and more of your customers will be converting to electric vehicles, and do you supply for them? So I think that there's, you've got to start to think about that as a business. You've got to be mindful of the one thing I would say around cost is don't be hung up on the on-the-road costs. If you look at the vehicle prices of electric vehicles, the on-the-road cost is much higher than an internal combustion engine. But when it comes to electric vehicles, you have to look at total cost of ownership. You have to look at that. And total cost of ownership generally comes out fairly even when you start to think about the reduced cost that it takes to run the vehicles. With various Octopus Energy, with ourselves, that they run a scheme. I'm actually on it. I have a battery electric vehicle myself. I only pay 5 pence a kilowatt during the small hours of the night. So when you're charging in those periods, I've gone from spending probably 150 to 160 pound a month on petrol before COVID, when I was actually traveling around. My electric vehicle probably cost me about 30 pound a month, the same sort of mileage, 30 pound a month. So actually, when you're building total cost of ownership, that's what you need to look at.
So over 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Over 3 or 4 year period, that's a big saving. So fabulous. Well, thanks for all the information on that, Mark. We'll keep the show moving forward. Anything else that you want to share with people before you head off?
No. If you by all means have a look at the Natwest Business Hub. If you are local, Chris Bodger is and Gary Wilkinson are two key contacts in the team. I know Gary's very prevalent on lots of these sort of events and what have you. But please pick up with those guys, or you can contact me via LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks for your time today, Mark. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye now. All right. Well, hopefully that's given you plenty of food for thought, removed a few of the barriers that maybe you thought about for electric vehicles. I think it's got to be a way we all start looking at. I know we are in our business, and most small businesses I know now, even just the business owners, are switching to electric vehicles. So let's talk now about businesses who are actually putting this into action at the moment. Let's bring David back into the conversation here. So David, we're going to bring in a couple of businesses. Are these businesses you've worked with?
So yes, I've worked with Royal Twins before, supporting with environmental management and also support in introducing LED lighting.
Perfect. Right. So first of all, we're going to bring in Ann Barrasso from Roy Thorne Solicitors. Now, Ann's been involved as operations director at the firm in a lot of these areas. So I'm going to bring Ann into the conversation now. And then, David, I think you have a few questions to speak to Ann about. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Hi, Ann.
Good, thank you.
Fabulous. Right. Right, David, what are the questions for Ann to talk about?
Hi, Anne. Good
Hi
to see
there.
you again.
Yeah, I'm good.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for joining today. And really, we just wanted to share the journey that you've taken to reducing your environmental impact to date. So just really to take us through, where as an organisation, what have you implemented so far, and what sort of journey have you started on?
Okay, well, we're a top 200 law firm with 5 offices, and my responsibility is to look after the buildings and all the services. What we did as a business is we thought, who can help us? So we joined Investors in the Environment in 2013, and because we needed to measure our environmental impact, and our staff were becoming more green, and they wanted to work with a company that puts sustainability on the agenda. So since 2013, we've looked at many initiatives, and energy efficiency is an area where we decided that gains could be made. So I can give you a little bit of a background on what we did what we implemented there, if that would help.
Yes, please. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
So in 2018, we thought there was a business energy efficiency grant, and we decided we'd look at replacing all of our internal lighting at our Spalding site, and that's about 21,000 square feet, so not a small premise. Not only could that give us some carbon savings and some financial savings, but it would also improve the quality of lighting for the staff. So we decided we wanted to work with a local company who had like-minded environmental goals, and so we went to tender with 3 local suppliers, engaged the contractor with the solution that used less wattage, supplied fittings from a reputable company, and also included self-test emergency fittings, which not only saved time because our staff were generally testing the fittings on a monthly basis, that also led to a cost saving.
Okay. And are you able to tell us a bit about, in terms of the investment into that, and what savings were achieved?
Of course. So the project cost was £27,500, and the grant was just under £7,000. So that was a huge benefit, to take on the grant. And we were so pleased with the LED fittings that in 2019 we went ahead and self-funded our external car park lighting to LED fittings. So the products for the internal use have 16 and a half years usage, and based on the running costs, no need to relamp nor dispose of the lamps. That could give us a financial saving too. So in terms of kilowatt hours, there's about a 16% saving over a 2-year period, and saving on new bulbs alone over a 2-year period saved us about £2,500.
Brilliant. So how quickly would you say that's paid back, or will pay back?
I mean, we went for the lifetime of the project, but in 2 years to have saved £2,500 on relamping alone is quite significant.
Brilliant. Okay. And you've mentioned, obviously, you work through Investors in the Environment, and that helped you look at the organisation from an environmental point of view. So how has the Investors Environment accreditation helped you to prioritise what you do?
Well, you touched on it a bit earlier, David, and I think what it does, it makes you think about everything, so that you have an annual audit, you have to follow the criteria, but that gives you a focus. And having the Investors in the Environment in the background, they can help you with queries, give ideas, put you in touch with other members. You're building up a great network. And then when you do your annual audit, you revisit what you've done over the past 12 months, because sometimes you're doing your day job as well. So, you know, that's not clear in your mind. So all of that helps you. And often you don't shout about your success, so it gives you the opportunity to do that too.
And has that helped with employees? How have they got on board? Has it helped the communication?
I think getting staff on board is really, really key, and the only way to do that is to keep communicating. So, you know, none of us has a monopoly on good ideas, and I find that people love a story, they love stats, and they like to share their stories with you too. So what we did is we set up a green team, and so these people are just like-minded, aware of the environmental impact, and they think about that both at work and at home. So the danger is greenwashing people, but we try not to. We just try to communicate to everybody by our staff intranet, and we've got a motto which is small changes to save the planet. So it's not about being perfect, even though it would be great if some of us could. It's about everybody just doing something to have a far greater positive impact.
Brilliant. Okay. And what's sort of next for yourselves? What have you got coming?
So where are we next? Well, green vehicles is something we would like to look at, and there's much more to look at in that. But we have a site in Alconbury, for instance, and there is a farmer there that you know, we can tree plant with, we can volunteer to plant those trees. So not only are we assisting a client, we're improving biodiversity on the farm and offsetting the carbon emissions. We're constantly working towards efficiencies, and in some ways lockdown has helped us because we've moved some things forward that otherwise might have taken a lot longer, and one being paper. So, you know, paper light has been a buzz slogan for many years. Lawyers like paper, it's just the way it is, but we have saved about £5,000 on paper alone over a 2-year period. So that will just be a continual process.
That's fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. Is there anything else you want to add before you go?
No, but just to say that if anybody would like any help or tips, or please do get in touch with me on LinkedIn.
And there's also the website as well there that we were going to share with everybody. Just share that with people. Our place in the environment. There's a bit.ly link down at the bottom of the page there, and that's the Roy Thorne Solicitors Environmental Policy. It shares a lot of what Anne was talking about there, and some of the installing of LED lighting that Anne was talking about there. So again, anyone who's got an interest, make sure you check out the website and the environmental policy on there. That's fabulous. Thank you very much, Anne. Let's just bring in Paul and Flora Bennett now. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, nice to be with you.
So you run Brackenborough Hall Coach House, and again, you've been on quite a journey in the past few years, and I know David's going to talk about that a bit with you as well.
That's right.
Okay. Do you want to just ask a few questions there, David?
Yeah, brilliant. Hi, Paul. Hi, Flora. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, we're all here.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, again, thank you very much for coming today. And we really just wanted to also just understand a bit about the journey that you've been on, particularly from the hospitality sector. So, you know, in terms of environmental objectives and opportunities. So I understand you work towards the Green Tourism Gold Award. So just interested to find out a bit more about that and how that supported you guys to think about what to do in terms of your activities.
Perhaps we ought to just say a bit about what we are and what we do first. So Paul is the farmer here on the family farm.
Yeah, so we farm at Brackenborough Hall, a mixed arable and beef farm. But as part of that, we have a coach house, or part of the estate here. It's a coach house, traditional coach house that we converted to the self-catering accommodation. So that's the Brackenborough Hall coach house part of it. Yeah, sustainability has been part of what we've aimed at. But Flora has another string to her bow as well.
So I'm a solicitor as well at Lincolnshire, and I do agricultural property. So I fit that in, and Paul's farmer full time, so we fit in the self-catering between us. But both of us are very keen on the environment and the impact, given that Paul's family have been at this farm for over 100 years. We're thinking long term. So we were really pleased to use that as a way that we can make some changes in our self-catering, which we actually opened 14 years ago. We applied for various awards, and we realised that there was something we could do on the green agenda, and so we applied for the Green Tourism Business Award, and we were very fortunate to be granted the Gold Award, which is the highest one.
And what processes did you go through to achieve that?
We read the green tourism basically has a process that's described as to what you need to achieve to get to various levels on that award, and we spent quite a lot of time going through that, through the list of things that we've done in terms of aiming for net zero. We've got solar panels. We heat the coach house and our house and another cottage on the farm with a biomass boiler. The farm's heavily involved in environmental schemes as well, so we have a higher level scheme, environmental scheme, which I'll give you more details of, and then basically working through all the things that effectively scored points towards getting the Gold Award.
So on the Green Tourism Business Scheme, they've got a very good website, and in there they've got information on different categories, so that you can work through their checklist to see how you measure up on all the different areas. So that sort of opened our eyes up to the fact that it's not just the obvious, the recycling and the like, but it's things like your position in the local community, and what you're doing with water as well as waste and other things. So we did quite a lot of research on the internet, on their website, and they have case studies as well, gives you examples of things that you can do. And then we went through their checklist and actually assessed what we were already doing and what we could do. And then that's, once we'd done that, we then put in an application, and we had an inspection, and the lady came out and went through it with us, gave us some more ideas, and then gave us our gold rating.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. And just in terms of your green credentials, I mean, have they been received by guests? So that are they recognised? Is it a sort of a talking point from people who visit the coach house?
Because we're on the farm, we're on the estate, the coach house is a listed building. The sort of guests we tend to get do tend to be green-minded. So greenness, sustainability, it's all part of the whole package, effectively, of what they're buying when they come and stay here. So they're keen on local produce, supporting the local economy, all that sort of thing. I think it's one of a number of factors. It's difficult to say they definitely booked that group booked because we've got the Gold Green Tourism Business Award. But I think the sort of people who come are generally interested in the farm. They're interested in environmental schemes. They're interested in a sustainable business that's been here for 113 years. So, something about sustainability is still being here next year each time.
Brilliant.
So I think it's one of a number of factors. It's difficult to say. Definitely, we've sold a lot more holidays because of it.
Fantastic. And just one last thing, sorry, just conscious of time. So in terms of the farming practice then, so you mentioned about the high level, what sort of activities are you doing on the farm to look at sustainability?
Well, the high level, I mean, the schemes available are always moving on. In fact, the high level scheme was a 10-year scheme that we're nearly getting to the end of, but there will be new agricultural policy with Brexit is completely changing in the next few years, but there will be new environmental schemes coming in. But things that we do, we've got some land that is sown to some pollen and nectar mixes to encourage pollinators. We've got some land sown to wild bird seed mixes, so it's a mix of seeds that you plant and then you don't harvest it, but therefore the seeds available to birds over winter. So that's filling in the sort of gap in the birds feeding system. The grassland is managed without fertilizers or chemicals. To encourage biodiversity, the way hedges are managed, we're encouraged not to trim hedges as often as sometimes has been done in the past. We have grass margins around the fields, dikes are managed and not trimmed out as often as they would be otherwise. So it's all things to encourage biodiversity. the other thing we're going to be, I mean, in terms of where we might be going in future, this is not necessarily to do with HLS now, but it's almost certainly going to come into environmental schemes in the future, is that there are various carbon audit programs for farms, and I'm certain that in the future we will do a carbon accounting audit to see where we are on the route towards net zero. And farming, the National Farmers Union has an ambition to reach net zero by 2040 ahead of the rest of the economy. Farming has a big role to play in absorbing carbon. In terms of the aim for net zero as the economy as a whole, farming is an industry that could be a big positive.
Absolutely, and it's really good to see you guys sort of pushing that target forward and getting there as soon as possible. And you're absolutely right in terms of farming and sequestration. I mean, just on that, in terms of sort of, I know within soil there's obviously a lot of carbon. Soil's an amazing carbon sink in terms of management, and that's an area that farmers can go. Are you doing any work around sort of managing the soil and sort of crops in that respect?
Yeah, we are. We have a strip till drill, but without trying to get too technical, it's reduced cultivations. Basically, whenever you move the soil, you release carbon into the atmosphere. So with reduced cultivations, you can you can reduce what we lose as carbon, and then the crop that's growing is sequestering carbon anyway. So you're trying to make that balance on the positive side rather than the negative side.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. It was really, really good to hear from you. I mean, just before we go, is there anything further, anything else that you're planning next?
I think on the self-catering front, what we'd like to do is put an electric charging point in for our guest cars. And at the moment, we're watching out for grants to help finance that, and also to see where the technology goes as to what type of charger to put in. So that's definitely on the agenda for that. But otherwise, we're constantly reviewing and looking at the cleaning products we use and how we're managing. With COVID, it's been a bit upsetting because we've had to use more plastic and more cleaning on bin liners and the like, but I hope to reduce that back again as things get a bit easier.
Fantastic. Well, I'll just share your website as well with everybody. So if you want to visit brackenboroughhall.com, and then under the About tab, you'll see there's an environment area there, so you can read more about the activity that Brackenborough Hall have been undertaking over the past few years and the award that they won as well. So thank you for your time today, Paul and Flora. I'll just have a quick final chat with David. Anything else you want to leave people with before we finish this show this week, David?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Richard. So, really good to hear from Ann, Paul, and Flora there. And I guess one of the things that has come out of that is, and I probably should have mentioned it earlier, another thing for organizations to consider is to look at a management system. So everything we talked today about actually understanding your organization, looking at the resources, understanding your carbon footprint, an environmental management or an energy management system, that's what they're designed to do. They provide you with a framework, they give you all the information that you need, and it allows you to actually systematically look at every element of the organization. And it also challenges you to think about where the opportunities exist. And by developing a system, by having that good understanding, it allows you to really think about where to invest, because we all know we need to invest in organizations. We all know we need to invest in infrastructure with changes in technology, but it's knowing where to invest and when to invest to really ensure that as an organization, we make those continual steps improvements as we work towards net zero. And so for any organization, I would say, if you haven't got a management system, definitely something to look at. There's a wide range of different organizations that can support you, from Invested Environment, as Anne's heard. There's also Planet Mark, B Corp, and other organizations, even ISO, if you want to go to that level, that can actually look at and help and support organizations in developing these systems.
Brilliant. Well, lots of information there. Thank you very much, David. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure there's been a lot that people are taking away with them now and going to put into action in their businesses. Thank you for your time today, David.
Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everyone's found that really interesting. There's plenty of ideas, as I was saying there, to take away and reduce our own carbon footprints in our businesses. Don't forget to put in your diary, there's no show in August, so there'll be no Business Lincolnshire live show in August, but we're back on Tuesday, the 28th of September. So I'll just bring the tag up for you. So Tuesday, the 28th of September is the next Business Lincolnshire live show. And this is going to be all about our teams, our workforce, our staff, and the people in our businesses and how important they are. So really interesting show. Because your people always drive your business. So make sure you put that in your diary, Tuesday, 28th of September, 2021. Thanks for attending today's show, and we look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye now.